Hello, Internet. Daniel with Driving and Dragons here with another D&D Reacts. This time I'm reacting to a channel I haven't ever seen before. It is Agranak Studios. This video on unpopular Dungeons and Dragons opinions popped up in my feed and it looked pretty interesting. So I figured we would experience this channel together. Looks like it's about a 5,000 or 6,000 sub channel. So pretty decent little small YouTube channel here, and we'll see what he has to say. While you're here, guys, got some great news. I have finally unlocked memberships and some of the other things that other programs that are available for the channel here. So if you sign up for channel membership, you'll get to participate in some polls, and I'm actually considering maybe doing a members only live stream. It's also unlocked super thanks and super stickers and super chats, that kind of stuff if you want to support the channel that way. Just like with my Patreon, if you happen to be a channel member at the time that I put it all together, when it's time to give away cars, you will be automatically entered into the drawing for the vehicle that I'm giving away, which will hopefully be the Dodge Dart here soon once I'm able to get it down here to Alabama and start working on it. But while you're here, guys, a free way you can support the channel is to like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. And just leave your comments below, participate in the discussion. And I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about these unpopular opinions as well. So we're going to jump into this. I'm going to do my absolute best to let him completely finish whatever point he's making about an opinion before I jump in and add my 2 cents. So let's see what we got.
Welcome back to Agranak Studios. I'm DM Wisdom. Last week, I posted on my YouTube community tab asking my subscribers what they thought of as a controversial or spicy take in regards to RPGs. Here's what you said and my personal take on it. Let me warn you, these are opinions, and opinions are like bad D20s. Most RPGers have them, and all of them roll natural ones, unless you have a die that is all 20s. If you have a differing opinion, leave it in the comments, but please be nice. All right, let's get to it. Bloodwolf Ninja 109 says, as the GM, never fudge your dice. I think the RPG community is kind of split on this one, and I can see the arguments for both sides. I would say there is a very slight 0.00001% of the time that I think that it would be viable. It's not something that I practice, not something that I do. The DM sets the scene, the players tell the DM what they're going to do, and then the dice tell the story. At least that's how I play. Shazam Von Doom 3.
Okay, so dice fudging. I've got whole videos on this, so I'm not going to belabor the point too much. He does make a pretty decent point here that it's one of those ones where the extremes are kind of the wrong thing here. On one side, the pro dice fudging side, just about every single, it's kind of like Rule Zero, almost every single rule book for every single RPG that is on the market either has an explicit or implicit permission from the actual game designer for the game master to fudge dice or fudge results. And the thing about it is you have to remember that verisimilitude matters, as does realism. And I've discussed the difference between those two things at length before as well. Verisimilitude is going to say, don't ever fudge the dice because you want it to be perfectly simulationist and perfectly repeatable. However, realism states that, these are all abstractions. We know they're all abstractions. And when you start talking about, say, a D20, each side of that die has a 5% chance. And there's going to be situations where you need to make adjustments to those dice to, for instance, simulate reality and make sure that you have a solid, enjoyable game where the die itself is just not refined enough to truly reflect the the results. And now what you're going to do is your failure is not going to be a failure. It's going to be a failure it's going to be a success that has some kind of other complications or something to it, or it's going to be reduced in degree. On the opposite side of the coin, you have the no dice fudging side. There's a lot of good reasons to not fudge dice, and especially if you're doing any kind of PvP, or if you're doing any kind of like certain large scale wargaming, that sort of stuff, which is PvP. You must have a system that does not allow for adjustment like that. And you have to have the trust. Where the issue lies in is the pro dice fudging people need to understand that you don't need to fudge dice anywhere near as often as you think you do. I fudge dice maybe 1 or 2 times in an entire campaign, and my campaigns typically last over a year. On the low side, I've had some that lasted several years, and still, I'm fudging a die roll like every 6 months, and it's generally not a singular situation. It's going to be a thing where it's like, I have a combat and 5 goblins attack, and it's just some kind of throwaway thing, or 5 commoners end up attacking my paladin. And the idea is he's like a level 10 paladin. They can't really hurt him, and he's going to do what's necessary to, stop them without hurting them. And the next thing you know, every single one of my peasants, first off, they roll natural 20s on their initiative. So they go first. Then every last one of them rolls a critical hit. Then every last one of them is rolling like extremely high damage. And I'm about to have my level 10 paladin just eviscerated by the crowd in something that is in no way in service to the game at all. Well, that's where the dice fudging comes in. Maybe those damage dice or some of those hits are not critical. And you still get the realism there. You still get the feel of what's going on, but you don't just get your level 10 paladin wiped out by a handful of peasants in one turn right off the bat for no reason. And that is, you look at the math of that. You're talking 10 natural 20s or 10 critical hits followed by a handful of high dice roll. You're talking 0.0001% chance, not, hey, I'm fudging dice once a session. If you're fudging dice once a session, you are either guaranteeing success and you may as well not even have dice, or you have seriously screwed up the way you've set up your campaign, and you need to make adjustments on the backside.
25 says this: emerging plots are better as additions to a DM's ideas rather than full zero prep. This is another one of those things that kind of splits the community, whether you should storyboard out your actual session, go full on zero prep, or somewhere in between. At the most these days, I have bullet points, and that works fine some of the time. Other times, I do full on emergent and roll on tables and see where everything goes. With the campaign that I've been running for about a year now, I do exactly that. Sometimes I bullet point things out, other times it's emergent. But there's plenty of sessions in my notebook that have the day of the week, the month, and the weather, and nothing else is written down. And we've had awesome sessions with just that. Wingus Ryu.
Okay, so this is another one that is on kind of a spectrum, and it's really a matter of extremes in scale. The difference between this one and dice fudging is there's not really a wrong answer. Your group, your players are going to fall somewhere on there on what provides the most enjoyment for them. And there really are no wrong answers. You have purely emergent storytelling where the only prep is literal game prep, random tables, and putting a world together for some baseline, that sort of thing, with like your hex crawls, where even the world is kind of rolled on random tables, and everything is 100% emergent, and the game master does nothing except for roll for what happens to be happening in the locality of the players at the same time. And then you have all the way on the other side where you have a very definitive through line of what's going on in the world, the raging river of history, and the players are swept up in it. And basically, no matter what they choose to do, they're going to be affected by the world around them and the story that's going on, whether they're going to fight against it or run with it. There's everything in between. The key here is running all of them well requires different things, and you have to have flexibility in that raging river. There has to be flexibility for the players to swim in whatever direction they want to. It may not be as easy to go against the current as with the current, but they have to have the freedom to swim in every direction. That's the difference between a railroad and a plot-driven narrative game. On the opposite side, when you're talking about zero prep, in a lot of ways, zero prep is more prep. It's just front-loaded prep, because you have to have results from those dice to emerge to have the emergent story. And that's just one of those ones where, of course, the community is divided, because every last one of us has different reasons we play the game and different things we want out of it.
8289 says this, and shout out to Wingus. He's my high priest over at our Discord. Make sure you go and sign up and join the community there. He says, I think I might prefer levelless games more for the reason that the players do not become obsessed with the concept of leveling. I don't want it to feel like a video game. This could get under some people's skin, thinking that there's not meaningful advancement without going through levels. I can go either way here. I see the power with leveling. I also see power with not having levels, getting away from that video gamey feel. But really, we only have the video game versions because of role-playing games. So that's something to keep in mind. I started playing in the 80s, and I was playing AD&D, which obviously has levels, but I was also playing two levelless games, which were Star Wars, the role-playing game, and Torg, role-playing the Possibility Wars. Both ways, as far as I'm concerned, are completely fine. But I do find that some players really enjoy seeing that level progression and therefore feeling, at least on paper, more powerful, even though technically they're not, other than with the descriptions of spells and how many attacks per round they get and all of that. It feels like they have power, but technically they're just fighting more and more powerful monsters. So really, I guess it's a philosophy choice. Ethan Grant.
Okay, so goofed up about 6 times there because it kept seeming like he'd gotten to the end of it. No argument there. This is just like the emergent story versus the narrative-driven game argument. This is 100% about what your players want out of it and how they react to things. I tend to prefer levelless games or systems that don't have leveled advancement because I like the smooth curve and the natural feel of progressing. And generally, when you get rid of levels, what you really have is, instead of one level up, you have dozens of levels up. So, for instance, when you go into the investigator progression phase in Call of Cthulhu, no, you don't have a character level, but you're having an opportunity to level up every single skill that you successfully used in the last session. So you may have no level up from experience as a whole character, but you have a dozen opportunities to level something up in there, within that one adventure. On the other hand, the leveled structure, it is very much more of a gamey thing, but it basically regiments out the game to where you have like I said, everything's an abstraction. And one of the things that a leveled extraction does is a player can make the assessment of, my character is level 3. That challenge seems very dangerous for somebody who is level 3, since they cannot feel their character's natural pressure or natural sense of danger for a given set of stimulus. Having a level and saying, hey, I know that level 3 and dragon don't really match, gives them something that is a stand-in for that part of their decision-making process. So there's good and bad to both sides, and a lot of this is just going to depend on what your players like the most and where they get their enjoyment from.
5061 says this: better stories appear when your character is mundane and not the lost child of a forbidden romance between a fairy queen and a werewolf. I'd much prefer following the exploits of Billy, the ex-radish farmer, while he survives the caves of chaos. Your character's adventures should start with the campaign, not off-screen in your backstory. I really like this, but I've found that characters enjoy that aspect of the game, which is not really part of the game, but helps them to get plugged into the game. I can see the power in both methods. Some of my most memorable play was with 0 level characters. I could go either way, so your mileage may vary on that. Sorry, I'm not being very opinionated here. Medieval fantasy.
He's not being very opinionated on here because if you're in any way rational, you recognize that most of these are stylistic choices that are going to appeal to different people and have appealed to different people. And really a true enjoyer of role-playing games can probably get a good amount of enjoyment from various different parts on the spectrum. I have run games successfully with similar groups and sometimes with the same group from one side to the other on pretty much all of these. And there's going to be some that they naturally prefer and that it's easier for them to enjoy, but you really should be able to find a way to enjoy just about any of them, at least within a window on those spectrums. In the case of this, I'm actually going to say that the bell curve really ought to be weighted when it comes down to what should happen and what's most enjoyable. The vast majority of your player characters really should be the more humble background type things. The problem with the Chosen One is the Chosen One is one. There is one that is superior. That doesn't work super well in collaborative games. And you can't have everybody be the lost scion of 1,000 dead lines, et cetera, son of Zeus and everything else. You really kind of have to be a group of everymen raising up to take on the world together because you're playing it's not a story, it's not a novel. You can't have a focus character. You have to have 4, 5, 6 focus characters. Now, each one can be kind of hero of their own story, but it's way more difficult to do the more special each one gets. The more special the snowflake, the more difficult it is to make everybody care about it and feel the way it needs to feel.
SCTV says this: Critical Role and Stranger Things were the worst things to ever happen to D&D. Damn, that's a tough one. That definitely is the spicy take, maybe even of this video. I can see where there is a lot of good. At least it invited a lot of people into the hobby. People are not playing Stranger Things D&D by and large. They're playing 5e. Hopefully they've moved away from that and are not continuing to give WotC money because, well, that company. But I don't think that it's been a problem. I really don't. I think it's brought more people into the hobby. When I've seen Critical Role, I don't really see anything different than what I do week by week. I'm not saying I'm Matt Mercer or that we have a bunch of voice actors. It's the same game to me. And I think Matt Mercer started when I started playing role-playing games. And so maybe we have that mid-school philosophy about gaming. So I don't really see anything different. So I don't think it's a bad thing that Critical Role exists, though they do have opinions on things outside of the game that shouldn't affect the game itself. And Stranger Things just reminded me of when I started playing the game and made me want to play more. I don't agree, but it is a spicy take. This is from Cavalier.
Okay, so now we get one we can actually discuss here. And it's 2 takes, really. I disagree about Stranger Things. I think Stranger Things was almost an exclusive good for the tabletop role-playing game hobby. Period. End of story. It has nothing to do with playing D&D. It doesn't have anything about teaching people how to play D&D. Really, all it does is D&D is a backdrop for what's going on, and it's these kids. You get to see them having fun. You get to see them enjoying the game and having the camaraderie downstairs. It completely takes away any of that leftover satanic panic crap because it puts it in a very, very wholesome light. Even when you do have like the monsters and the Demogorgon and all that stuff and Vecna coming out, from the upside down, that has nothing to do with actually playing D&D. That's just, they just use D&D terms to explain the supernatural stuff around them in the show. I don't see anything at all that is a negative from Stranger Things. It is fantastic for the hobby, getting rid of a lot of stigma, casting it in a more positive light, and popularizing it and bringing more people into it. And even if you have to gatekeep a little more to keep some of the less desirable people for your table off of your table, you still at the same time get more people to choose from, make it easier to have that group. And let's face it, it actually allows you to, quote unquote, gatekeep more, because now you have a larger pool of people to pick from. So maybe that one guy that you just kind of tolerate because he fills the seat and he's okay, you don't need him anymore. You can have somebody who's a better fit. Critical Role, on the other hand, my thoughts are pretty well known on this. I'm going to press X to doubt that it looks super similar to his game, because Critical Role does not look anything like playing Dungeons and Dragons. It looks like something that is set up to mimic playing Dungeons and Dragons, because that's what it is. It's a scripted improv show. And really the only thing that's Dungeons and Dragons about it is that they do actually follow the rules of the game, and they roll the dice and they improv off of what the results of the dice are. But I think Critical Role is a massive net negative for a lot of things. One, it brings in a large group of people who see it as kind of a lifestyle brand, extreme social leftist geek chic implement. And a lot of times what they're doing, they're bringing their politics in first. They're bringing their socio-political views in first, and just see D&D as a community for them to be part of, to share this kind of thing, rather than being part of the actual community. That leads to worse games. It leads to the games being politicized and pushing the other side out for no real reason. It's not a good, and it wouldn't be a good thing if it was happening from the other side either, just so you're aware. If for some reason, like the extreme, like Milo Yiannopoulos alt-right decided they liked D&D, or decided they liked TTRPGs and started really pushing their philosophies and their political and social policies into the game to where it started corrupting it, that would not be good either. So I think Critical Role, for a lot of the social reasons and for a lot of the unrealistic expectations, has become, it's really poisoned to the TTRPG well in a lot of ways. So Stranger Things, unmitigated good in my opinion. Critical Role, 90% bad.
Clara Sancho, he says, rules as written, one time, rotate GMs, and characters are communal. I think that would work for maybe 4 or 5 sessions, but man, I would hate to play that way. I would just hate to play that way. I think rotating GMs would be fun, as long as you're of the same mindset and understand the world. One time, no, just no. Rules as written, absolutely not. D&D started off as homebrew and was constantly being tweaked. So the spirit of the game is homebrew. Characters are communal. Again, that would be fun for a few weeks, but man, I like being plugged in to my character. Very spicy take. All right, next one.
Okay, so that basically just spewed out the Bro SR stuff and said, hey, use this as a sounding board. Once again, my opinion is pretty well known. However, this is another one where I wouldn't call it baby in the bathwater here. It's just where extremism became the problem, taking something to excess. There is a philosophy of rules as written that is definitely something you should have. First off, if you have PvP, you have to have rules as written. Or at the very least, you have to have explicitly defined rules. You can't have a lot of just DM opinion in there when you're talking about PvP. But aside from that, it is a situation where rules as written, you should really try to use the rules as they're written in any place where they do fit the situation, where they do explicitly handle whatever mechanic it is. So, for instance, when you're talking about pluses and minuses in combat and to hit and damage and hit points, these should be almost explicitly rules as written. I mean, that's where the dice fudging comes from. You are fudging it around the rule as written. If you're not running rules as written, you don't need to fudge because you've already completely rewritten how things work. But some of these mechanics are great. One-to-one time, using multiple characters. One-to-one time makes using multiple characters far more functional. And that is an opinion, and it is a stylistic choice, and it can be a very good one. There's nothing wrong with that. The thing about rules as written is they really should be understood so that you can run rules as intended, and then you start homebrewing. So you need to understand them to do rules as intended as opposed to rules as written, because rules as intended is infinitely superior to rules as written in every way. Period. End of story. The intent is far more important than the words on the page. That's where the raw crowd gets it wrong. However, homebrew should be informed homebrew, and you should not just say, oh, the game has always had homebrew, so we should just always use our homebrew. Well, the game has already always had homebrew, but you have to remember that the original homebrew was the guys who literally created the game. They definitely understood the intent before they started changing things.
Merlin Sturgandeldor says this as well. There's a follow-up. They're kind of the same thing, hitting on the same subject. Hrothgar Runelfer, 1972. Hopefully I said that right. So the first one from Merlin, first edition level caps for demi-humans and level drain mechanics for the win. And Hrothgar says, level caps for non-human characters are a good thing. Advancement past 5th level should be incredibly rare. Everything has too many hit points. Cut all hit points by 50%. I totally agree with this. I think that there should be level caps with demi-humans, but I also think that you should explain to your characters why that's a thing. They do gain many additional benefits as demi-humans, and because they're long-lived, are not necessarily as ambitious as humans. In fact, they shouldn't be in any way, shape, or form, which is why they should have the level cap. And I do agree that past 5th level in a game like D&D, things start to break down. I typically range between 1st and 10th, and I've gone up to 20th and even beyond that. But, 1st through 10th, that is where the sweet spot is and where the rules really shine. And I agree, everything has too many hit points. Cut all HP by 50%. Sorry, Wizard. Coyote,
Okay. I actually disagree with a lot of this. Bring back level drain. Absolutely, level drain should be a thing. It represents something that is literally sucking out your essence and removing your power and experience from you. This is something that can happen naturally in real life. It's called things like Alzheimer's and dementia and just the deterioration. However, when it comes to things like level caps and the adjustment for demi-humans and that sort of thing, absolutely not. It should not be a level cap. 3rd edition did this properly. 3rd edition did this better than 1st and 2nd for sure, and really better than anything else. How? To represent that humans are more adaptable, more ambitious, more eager to learn, and cram more into their shorter lifespan, Humans got more skill points every level, and they got an additional feat at first level. And it actually led to humans being in almost all cases, human was the most powerful character class or character race, end of story in 3rd edition. That's just how much the feat and the extra skill points made for humans, plus the free ability to multi-class with no experience penalties for basically whatever class they wanted to pick. The way you fix this is with 2 things. One, you have the character race adjustments, the level adjustments that you have in 3rd edition. You want to be a tiefling? Sure, but you are essentially a 3rd level character starting off. Tiefling is basically your first 2 levels. You're going to gain experience more slowly than everyone else. You're going to, and I say you take it even a step further, you are going to treat your race as a character class. So you're going to take penalties for your experience just because you chose a powerful demi-human race. So you're not going to have a level cap, but you are going to level slower. That's how you correct that situation and emulate that human versatility and human ambition without just putting an arbitrary stop on them. Because at the same time, you want to say it's like, oh, they shouldn't, we should have level caps. No, you shouldn't. Because an elf who is 500 years old has had 500 years to learn about wood carving. He's going to be a better wood carver than any human in that 500 years. It doesn't matter if he only picks it up every so often. It's 500 years. He should absolutely not have a level cap. He should just get it a lot slower. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Y100 says this: the pure level up is overrated. Going back to levels, handing out milestone goodies or let them find awesome loot. That's my personal favorite method. The only real deal for the older school games is for wizards having more spell slots to play with. I think it's a spicy take, especially if you get rid of levels for a game like D&D. I know there's people that do that and are just kind of like, oh, we will hand out things as we see fit. But yeah, I don't know. It is a spicy take. I could take it and I could run with it myself. But again, I think you would have to explain it to your players, and your players would need to be on board. I don't think it's for everyone. But I love levelless games. Let me be clear about that. I don't think that that's a problem at all. It's just if you're going to introduce that into a game like D&D, you might start having some problems. Jonathan
you shouldn't mess with the leveling system in a game. All right. And when I say you shouldn't mess with it, I mean, if the game was designed to be levelless, it needs to be levelless. And if the game was designed to have levels, it needs to have levels. Don't screw around with that, because there is a certain degree of balance that is necessary in the game. And that's part of it. And when you start saying, oh, well, we're just going to you normally get 10 skill points per level, so we're going to give those out in 2 skill point chunks, you start really messing with things as the game progresses. It's just a bad idea. If you want to have the more natural leveling, stop playing Dungeons and Dragons and pick up a game that doesn't have the leveling mechanics. One of the biggest things about Dungeons and Dragons that leads to bad games is people always try to cram things that are not optimized for D&D into D&D, or try vice versa. Basically D&D is a hammer, and they're trying to do all of their auto repairs with a hammer. Sure, if you sit there and smack that angled edge of a bolt with a hammer, you can turn the nut around the bolt and eventually get it off. You're going to damage the bolt. It's going to take you forever. Get a socket wrench.
Olano 4113 says this: flying races aren't broken, and flight itself is way overestimated in its value as an ability. That's spicy. That is spicy. If you're playing a gonzo game with a bunch of furries, absolutely have at it. I've had fun with this sort of thing. And I think flight should be used in game, but I also personally think that it should be limited to a specific period of time. That goes along with the emergent story or the story that is being laid out. But bypassing ravines, cliff sides, canyons, or flying up to the top of a mountain and resting on the uppermost roof of a castle that you're supposed to infiltrate, yeah, I'm not into that at all. But I see where both can be fun. But I definitely lean towards no flight. Gray Wolf.
Okay, this is lazy game master problem is what it is. It comes into you got GMs that are just terrified of saying no. And you have to be able to say no to your players, like when a flying race just doesn't make any sense or is not part of your world and your game is not designed for it. Of course, it's going to break things if it's not. But it really just comes down to the realism that we talked about before and where the game needs to be realistic. If you have a world where flying races are really all that common, then accounting for those flying races is also going to be common. That castle you're trying to infiltrate is going to have anti-air defenses. It's going to have things set up to shoot them out of the sky or catch them coming in. It's going to be designed in a way that doesn't allow you to just fly over the wall. Maybe it'll have a roof or some other thing. These things are going to be accounted for, just like magic is going to be accounted for. If that magic exists, the counter magic is also going to exist, unless it's super rare. And then also using flight in realistic fashions. Flying is just like running. If you're flying at full speed, you're going to have exhaustion and that sort of thing. And exhaustion is really bad when you're flying through the air. You're going to have differences in temperature. You're going to have wind currents and things that can be added into, in D&D, it's typically represented in the maneuverability that they have, whether they're good, poor, clumsy. You need to understand these things because I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of player characters, when they have flight, the DM just goes in and treats them like they have perfect maneuverability instead of looking in and say, oh, you actually have clumsy maneuverability. All right. It's all about just making rational choices and rational decisions around that flight that give it its disadvantages, and then designing things with flight in mind.
Raycon says this: you shouldn't need special homebrew rules, spells, whatever. If you're truly creative, you can do epic stuff with whatever is available. So rules as written. It's about thinking outside the box, not having a bunch of special tools at your disposal. That's a spicy take. I don't agree at all. Like I said earlier, all D&D is homebrew. That's all it is. And so homebrew, I think, is a part of the game. I personally don't want to play with a rules lawyer, and I definitely don't want to play rules as written. But that's just me. Again, it's just an opinion. Yori the human.
Okay. I agree with him, but for different reasons. I don't agree with his reasoning at all. There's truth in the take. You should be thinking about how to use what's already there in unique ways rather than just trying to create something else that could be emulated otherwise. That is part of the game. That's part of what being a good player is. For instance, you remember back in the early days, an illusionist was a specialty class for the wizard. It was something really spectacular and special. And if you are creative in how you use illusions, they can be absolutely deadly, even at low levels. And even with you can have very outsized effects by using them creatively. Same with any other kind of spell or any other kind of ability. That creativity needs to be there. But that is not an excuse for rules as written. Homebrew matters because sometimes you need to adjust the rules and you need to adjust what's available and what's there to fit a specific theme or a specific way that you're playing. If I'm going to try and emulate like a gritty sword and sorcery world where magic is a a very rare thing, I need to make sure that I have truly limited that magic in a way to where everybody still plays on kind of a level playing field. And the wizard is not drastically outpacing everybody simply because magic weapons aren't really a thing, so the fighter is just getting left in the dust. That homebrew needs to be there. Rules is written, and being creative does not magically make rules is written work. They're not mutually inclusive, they're not mutually exclusive. But I do agree that some homebrew should be there to enhance the feel you're going for. You can't solve every single problem simply by having creative use of spells and abilities.
Says this: any character with 90 plus HP is a curse. It's a torture. Counting hits is better. Only 3 hits for gritty sword and sorcery low level mode, and 7 hits for high fantasy epic level mode. I love playing with hits. My workaround for a game like D&D is to have maximum hit points go to about between 15 and 30 for player characters. And with an average of 6, 7, or 8 points of damage per attack against a player, that roughly adds up to about 3, 4, or 5 hits. So I totally like this. And you should lower your monster's hit points overall. There's just too many. No need to slog it out. Maybe if it's the BBEG. But that's up to the DM to decide on the fly. The Pale Emperor says,
hit points are one of those things where D&D just is bad, especially the later editions where they just astronomically increase as you level up. Because the problem is not only does your HP go up, but your ability to be damaged also goes up. And even though your ability to do damage increases as well, as a general rule of thumb, that's 2 defensive increases for every offensive increase. My ability to do damage goes up at a certain rate, but I also have my ability to reduce the damage I take and heal the damage I'm getting that are also going up, and I've got my hit points going up. What you just created is a situation where I have 2 to 3 durability related factors that are going up at the same rate or a similar rate to the ability to do damage. So they're going to outpace. That's just an issue with it. Hit point reduction is one way to fix it, but number of hits is a reasonable way to kind of make those adjustments. But honestly, I don't think it's quite that simple. I will say that I don't think there's like a fixed number, like over 90 is just a curse. But astronomical hit points become a problem. And realistically, I think this could be handled by simply drastically reducing hit die, or by adjusting the way armor works, or maybe mitigating the rate at which all these things go up, reducing healing. A big thing is you got to get rid of some of the 5th edition things like the long rest and that sort of thing. You can't just magically heal everything without even using the magic.
Perception checks should be banned. If the player doesn't state where or what their PC is looking for, then it never happened. Damn, that's a spicy take. I've been using perception checks since Torg came out in 1990. And I gotta say, I use it all the time. And I would say to a fault. So maybe I might look more into this. This is a spicy take for sure. Yeah, now you got me thinking. Yeah, even Hilo.
That is not a spicy take. That is an outright idiotic take. I've said this before. As the game master, you are the player's senses. They are not walking into a room where they can notice or miss something. They only get the information that you provide to them. So if there's something that they could miss, it should not be I walk into the room, I look in the corner, I look in the drawer, I look over here, I look over there, I look at everything, I scan every place. Now, I think that maybe the passive perception should be limited to a certain extent. And if there's something that they should notice, it should be hey, roll a spot check. Hey, roll a listen check. or you roll it for them. But it should not always be I explicitly look at this thing. I explicitly review this area of the building. That is just idiotic. Because here's the thing. I can walk into the room next to me right now. And yes, if I walk in there and I say, hey, I'm going to go look behind the couch, me going and looking behind the couch is like, hey, I'm legitimately doing this actively. We need to describe what's behind the couch, or I need to roll a search check or something of that nature. And honestly, to look behind the couch, it probably should be something that I state, because that's not something I would naturally notice. However, if I walk into the room next door and there happens to be a plate sitting on the floor because the dog knocked it off the countertop, I should not have to say I walk in and explicitly look at the floor for any knocked over dishes. I should be able to walk in and be like, hey, roll a spot check. Hey, you noticed that a dish got knocked off. The dog must have done it.
229 says, opportunity attacks is a bad mechanic. Yeah, I kind of think they're dumb too. I really do. Yeah. Spicy take, and I agree. We'll end with this one.
No, opportunity attacks are not a bad thing. They can be a bad thing mechanically, especially in 5th edition, because the amount of player actions has just gotten out of hand. Honestly, if you look at 5e, you don't get rid of opportunity attacks, you get rid of bonus actions. But attacks of opportunity actually do make sense and do matter. It is a simulation of exactly what it sounds like. Taking advantage of something that is opportunistic, where it's maybe normally I wouldn't be able to take this attack or I wouldn't be able to hit this person, but because of other circumstances, they have been exposed to my ability to make said attack. I certainly agree with the way 3rd edition does it, where you only get one unless you have special training to do otherwise. And I would even say that maybe an attack of opportunity should be like a reverse initiative benefit. So, for instance, if you've already gone in the initiative order, you don't have them anymore. You only get the attack of opportunity if you have not yet had your initiative. It's kind of like you get to jump up and do something, take part of your action now because this person did something that preempts the initiative order. That is an argument or a discussion I would have all day long, every day. But saying, oh, the attacks of opportunity are just stupid, that's just an idiotic take.
Toothache AZ, maybe Toothache Arizona. I don't know. He rattled off a bunch of things. I'll just say whether I agree or not as I go down. Fantasy is the worst TTRPG genre. Spicy take for sure. I think you might just be trying to ruffle some feathers here. Yeah. I don't agree. Weird dice are always more fun than.
Hey, the fantasy is the worst. First off, that's just an opinion statement. I don't really think you could back it up with anything other than just raw opinion, because it's by far the most popular. It's definitely the progenitor. It's by far, even if you take D&D out of it, it's by far the most expansive. And it evolved from that genre. I don't really see how you could justify that take. And now, what I might say is X game is the worst for the fantasy genre, or fantasy is the worst genre for X system. And vice versa. Cyberpunk is the worst, or modern is the worst for this system or that system. That makes a little bit more sense. But other than that, that's just kind of I think he's right. That's just somebody trying to get a rise.
Ordinary dice. I agree. Not being able to calculate the odds in your head is a good thing.
All right, so you got 2 there because he's kind of rushing and through them. Abnormal dice, I mean, as long as they function and as long as they give you the same kind of odds and they're not more easily manipulated than a standard die, I mean, it's kind of cool to have funky looking dice. I mean, better or worse. I mean, your mileage may vary. And I kind of just forgot the one he was just saying.
Totally agree with that. Character death is the most boring option. Yeah.
No, character death is not the most boring option. That's just idiotic.
I would agree with that. There's other things you can do. Even in a TPK, there are other planes of existence and, well, dimensions even. But
seriously, That's still player death. You're just saying, oh, their soul is somewhere else. No, that's just stupid.
Death does happen, and it happens often in my games. I really dig this next one. Characters should get weaker over time until they need to retire or go out in a final sacrifice act like real life. This got me thinking about, since my sweet spot is 1st through 10th level, that you could go to 20 levels, right? But you have them go all the way up to 10th and then regress, if they're cool with it, all the way back to 1st level, then 0, then retire. It's an interesting concept. I'll have to think more on that one.
Yeah, it's really a stupid concept. You don't start taking away their abilities. Just do what 3rd edition did and have age mechanics. Whereas they age, they lose abilities.
Did you agree with any of these? Did you disagree? Let me know in the.
And obviously, I agreed with several. I disagreed with others. Largely, I think this is a pretty cool channel. I think he's got good stuff, and everything was kind of well thought out and well presented. So maybe we'll take a look at it more. You tell me in the comments below, what did you think was best? What did you think was worse? While you're here, like, share, and subscribe. See you guys next time.